I believe that everybody's ready to go on a break.
Yeah.
Well, let's go ahead and get started and see if I can get you guys out pretty quick. We're going to today look at the sensory impairments, and these are the part of the lower incidence disabilities. Interesting thing is that with visual and auditory impairments, most often these kids don't have a cognitive issue going on. They have a being able to see and hear correctly issue. So it's more about adjusting work material so that they can see it or hear it better, or providing other kinds of ways to access the information. So we're going to look at this. We're going to watch a couple videos, and during those videos what I want you to do is jot down some things that you learned from what's happening in the classroom that you can take into the classroom if you have a child with either a visual or an auditory impairment. So that's the big, what we're going to do today. All right, so here is we're going to look at the auditory or the visual impairment definition first and walk through all those pieces. Visual impairment includes blindness and means an impairment of vision that, even with correction, adversely affects a child's educational performance. The term includes both partial sight and blindness. Now, the reason that we do that is because we kind of think if you're blind, you can't see anything, right? Most of the people that are in this category, even though they might be called blind, they can see something. They have some kind of residual vision. Rarely will somebody be totally blind and not see shapes or sight, colors or movement. So the legal blindness is identified as 2,200. Like most people can see at 200 feet, they can see at 20 feet. So that's legal blindness, and anything over that acuity is considered blind. So that is a very interesting piece. So that we'll try to use their, in this day and age, we don't do a lot of Braille. We do a lot more with enlarging the material, enlarging the computer screens and those kind of things, and not doing as much Braille. Maybe about 10% of the kids use Braille. So that's, you'll see a video that the girl is using Braille, but it's a lot less than it's been in the past. So who has to be involved in the evaluation for a student with a visual impairment? A licensed ophthalmologist or an optometrist, so a medical doctor or a doctor of ophthalmology that must be included. A vision specialist must be involved, and a teacher that is trained in visual impairments must be involved. So there's additional people that are in the FIE, and they attend the IEP meetings, not the doctor necessarily, but the teacher of the visually impaired does. You need to have a functional vision exam and a learning media assessment by a teacher of the visually impaired who conducts those. So those must be included. So those are some elements in assessment that is different than it is for a typical student with all the other disabilities. Like I had said before, legally blind. Now, functionally blind means a child with a visual impairment that is their vision evaluation and their media assessment says the child will use tactile media, which includes Braille. So tactile media is that I had a student. She was born congenitally without eyes at all. And so one of the ways that we taught her to be able to access the school was that she would have to drag her hand along the wall. And when she got to a corner, we would have tactile stuff like a piece of felt or a piece of Velcro, something that would tell her if that hallway was one she needed to turn down. So we would use tactile, not visual cues. And so that, by doing that, she was independent to be able to go through the building and go with people. So we're going to watch a video, and this is about a young girl with visual impairments. And I want you to pay close attention to the classroom and what's going on in the classroom so you can have an idea of what you might need to do for that student with a visual impairment.
Dealing with the daily ups and downs, bumps and bumps of school life is something most children take for granted. But imagine coping with classes, corridors and playtime if your world is just a hazy blur. In this programme, we spend a day with Anna, a visually impaired pupil at Wadhurst Primary School in East Sussex. Through trial and error, the staff has worked towards integrating her into the school.
I'll put a snack there like that to remind us. Okay, let's have one more.
I think the lessons from Wadhurst is that they're currently displaying good practice in inclusion, but we'd like that to become standard practice, essentially. And the fact that they're not setting themselves up as experts, they've experienced problems, but they keep at it.
So what problems have they had to overcome? How hard has it been for the school to ensure she can access the curriculum? And how difficult has it been for her to make friends? Is Anna's world a happy one?
I like lessons. I like lunchtime.
Is there anything you don't like?
Well, I don't like sometimes at playtime, I don't like people saying, well, they won't let me do a show series or they won't let me play.
That's not very often though, is it?
Well,
No. And it does like to be the boss. Just like to dictate to everybody else what they must do, what they can do. So sometimes when they say no, which is quite good for her, really.
no, it's bad for my feelings.
Bad for your feelings, but good for you. Otherwise you'd be spoiled.
Anna's day starts the same as her classmates. First lesson is maths. She does exactly the same work as the rest of the class, but has to work closely with her specially trained teaching assistant.
Okay, you ready?
Tell me what you like about maths.
I like, it sounds like 2 add 1 equals 3. I like my times tables. I learned them, but I don't learn most of the things in maths.
Anna has 2 Braille reading teaching assistants, one of whom is with her all the time.
We try to include her as much as possible in the classroom. Basically, what our aim is to make sure that she's not excluded in any way. It's to support her in her learning generally, every aspect of learning, playtimes, everything.
Yeah, so we've got room number, well, sometimes it's a case of wandering off and leaving her. Because otherwise she'd be quite happy just to stand and let you do it all for her. Because it's easier. I've had to stop and think about stuff that you just do every day without giving it a second glance, giving her things and expecting her to take them without actually touching her finger or something with the pen. And that's the hardest thing, pointing and just assuming.
Also, I think it's to do with giving her independence and allowing her the space to develop the way that she can do things. With me, I found that I was trying at first to do it for her, whereas you have to actually sit back and allow the child to try and then to guide.
We did have a chat about that, didn't we, with when she comes off the carpet when Kate set a task. And Anna would just come over and then just stand, and you'd have to say, right, get your brailler, get your jelly mat, get your paper, right, we're doing science, we need blue paper for science, get something, have you put your paper, and it was just one list of instructions. So Maggie and I had a chat and we said, no, what we do is we turn them all into questions. And what do we need now? Right, if we're going to do writing, what do we need now? Making her think for herself.
How much harder do you think it is for her possibly to make friends sometimes, or new friends, because she's got you guys around as her support?
Oh, well, that's part of the stepping back. I mean, when Louise and Catherine, who are Anna's main support, aren't they? They're her best friend. Catherine's her best friend. And Catherine's really cool because she makes it look like that's what everybody does when you're best friends.
Well, I like Louise and Catherine and also Annabelle. I get Catherine to help me make sure I don't bump into things. So Catherine is my helper.
The other children in the class benefit from her presence and she benefits from them. And I'm always amazed at how she gets around places. The other children in the class know her well. They know better than I do how to support her, for example, walking around the school. And it's almost like she bounces off them as she walks down the corridor.
They help me, but they mustn't treat me like a baby. Because I'm not a baby now. I'm an 8-year-old.
She's very direct child. She will tell them if it's too much help.
I say, please don't fuss over me. You're giving me an earache or a headache.
It might seem like, you want to wrap them up in cotton wool and put them in a small school where nobody's going to, bump into them and her in particular, but it isn't the best, life is quite difficult and there are a lot of people out there who are not going to treat her with kid gloves and you can't wrap her up in cotton wool all the time.
Straight line. Good, yeah, that was fantastic.
Sometimes there are issues for visually impaired children in terms of empathy and understanding other children.
Good girl.
And sometimes things need to be talked through with Anna. She might not understand why a child's gone off or something. That all the nuances of visual expression and that kind of thing, she won't be able to key into like other children do. And so she does need support in understanding other people, in understanding her impact on other people, but also why they're reacting in certain ways as well.
It's important for other children within the class to recognise the situations and to get them on your side and on her side, and for them to become friendly, for them to understand the relationship that should be developing between them. Sometimes at an early stage, staff can go into the playground, for instance, and try and help to initiate games, and then withdraw. It's very important to try and withdraw as soon as possible so that the child can actually be interacting properly with the other children.
Well, my class friends sometimes get sad when I cry, and sometimes they get angry when I do naughty things.
One of her targets, the last term was it?
Yes,
Was to look like she's listening. Because otherwise she gets in this.
to attend to the teacher, to actually make sure that she's facing towards
The
the
person
teacher,
who's
so
talking,
that the person who's
Yeah.
talking knows that she is listening.
Who do we know that works for the government who might pretend to write a petition?
Jean took ages to explain that people can't tell if you're listening to them, if you're not looking. And if you're not looking, then people won't talk to you. And part of it is it's a lot of socialisation we're working on majorly.
She forgets a lot
Interactive.
about everyday things that we take for granted.
Niceties, isn't it? That you pick up on visual, spatial awareness when she's talking to your belly button.
It's knowing what's going on around her, because she can't actually see what's going on around her. She has no idea what the other children are looking like, for example. She hasn't developed an awareness of appropriate behaviour really like we have.
Where does he live? Some work which Anna does within the classroom is very much on her own, simply because it's much easier for her to be working with a TA. In other cases, it's very important for her to be working with other children as members of the group. Of course, this will help her social interaction with them.
It's very difficult actually, and I've tried to set aside time when I work with Anna and a group, but obviously, just being one of me, I have to get around to every child in the class, you know, the literacy and numeracy.
Anna, what about you?
Get loads of energy.
That's a good one. So it helps you to get some energy, does it? Why do we need energy, Anna?
To try and work with a group and Anna is very difficult. So in some cases it works, but for some lessons it's just not practical. But I do, you know, you do make a concerted effort, but it's not at all easy.
Why not you need energy?
Playtime, when you do your work, you have to have energy. But if you don't, you won't do any work and you'll be in trouble.
Excellent, so good girl.
Recently, the most frustrating thing is the noise the brailler makes when she's having to braille, and particularly if Kate has said we've got to work in silence, and all you can hear is her. She's very aware of how loud the braille is. So that should be sorted with a new piece of kit when we come in.
Anna has a lot of equipment to help her access the curriculum, all paid for by the LEA.
This is my brailler. You use this counter turn, like that. This is a CCTV. It's a new one. You have two buttons to turn it on and off. It makes things bigger when I can't see small things. Let me tell you about my computer. These are the keys, and this is the keyboard. These are the speakers, and there's my new printer.
But there can be a downside to so much extra equipment in the classroom.
To be honest, my classroom isn't that big anyway, and with 29 children and another adult, it's very limited in space. So to use up that whole corner, and I'm always saying to everybody, no more room, you know, you can't have any more room.
Can you see Mr. Skeleton over here? Can you see him? Yeah. Where's his pelvis? You need to watch carefully because you're going to be doing this in a minute.
I have to be a lot more organised and forward think quite a lot, so that Anna's teaching assistants and her visiting teacher are able to get the work and modify all the worksheets and prepare that, which obviously takes quite a long time. Things like maths planning and literacy planning, I have to meet with her visiting teacher once a week, which can take up to an hour, maybe more on different days. I think one of the big mistakes I make is I love to think on my feet and change my plans and think, oh, that's going to work better, and it doesn't when you've obviously impaired child, because there's so much planning that needs to go into what she has to do. Things like using reference books is always really difficult, and you have to plan that for weeks in advance so that we can order them in Braille or get other alternatives in. But in terms of actually having Anna in the class as a pupil,
it's been a lot easier than I anticipated.
When Anna was born, like any child, you have, without even thinking about it, you have a life mapped out. And when you find out that your child is blind, somehow that life dies. But that life that you thought was taken away isn't taken away. It's just slightly different. So that's what we want for Anna, for her to be who she is, but given every opportunity to be what she wants to be in the future.
All right, so share with me your thoughts on what you learned, what you saw in the classroom with Anna and her teacher. What did you guys see? And anybody online that wants to speak up, we can hear you too. So if you want to share what you saw, that'd be great. What did you guys see?
Life on board during discussion, just
A personal one, right? And so that she can use her residual vision to see and not have to worry about the board. What else did you see?
She does the same work as the other students if you include it.
I'm sorry?
She does the same work as the other students if you include it.
Right. There was incorporating others into the stuff. What about all the equipment that's in the classroom? That, small class size and stuff, but that's required. It's shrunk now a lot because now should probably carry around an iPad more often than not and use the whiteboard on the iPad and the CCTV thing and to make things larger is much smaller and thinner than it was before, and not so much braille stuff, but there's still a lot of equipment they would need, magnifiers and different stuff that's in the classroom. So, and then how about the addition of paraprofessional support? Additional people, adults in the classroom. And that's its own issue when you have additional folks in there too. So interesting. So did you, anything specific that you guys learned from this that you want to take forward? Something the teacher said is really important for you guys. You have to, and then it'll be when we get to the auditory impaired, be reinforced. A lot of pre-work, a lot of work before the child gets there, before you have to know how you're going to accommodate the curriculum to meet those needs of the students. So you've got to be thinking way in advance. So on your lesson plans, you need to have that information written out. So that's really important. So for you guys to think about. All right. Let's see what else we have about that. So now we're going to move to auditory impairments and deafness. Again, deafness means a child is impaired significantly. Auditory impairments, it's like low vision and it would be, but it's significant impairment in both ears. It's got to be bilateral, so both ears. And both of these would affect the child's educational performance. So we've got deafness and hearing impairments. It's kind of two, but I put them together as one because they all fit into that one category of auditory impairments. So an assessment is similar to a visual impairment. However, you've got to include an otolaryngologist, and that's a big, long word for ear, nose, and throat specialist. You know, ear, nose, and throat folks must be involved. And then a person that's trained in audiology, a licensed audiologist, they're a medical doctor or a doctor of audiology must be included to know what kind of hearing devices they use. I have very, very intimate with this since I wear hearing aids. Don't go out shooting without your current hearing protection because it will cause problems. Listening to loud music in your car, I worry about your generation with earbuds and everything. I think it's going to be worse for you guys. As you get older, this is most an old person disorder, but you got a lot of kids that have it too. So, you have to have a plan for finger spelling and using sign language and using their residual hearing. So these are some things that must be included in the process. So we're going to watch Rosie now, and I want you to do the same thing you did with Anna about the video.
My name is Rosie, and I go to Wilton Primary School.
Rosie attends Willington Primary School in Eastbourne, a mainstream school with a facility supporting hearing impaired children attached to it. Willington works hard to include Rosie in every aspect of school life.
I'm Jan Pearman, teacher of the deaf, and I'm head of the hearing support facility. At this hearing support facility, we use total communication, which generally encompasses all forms of communication. So depending on the child and depending on the context, we might use sound supporting English or signed English or VSL or oral communication or a combination of all of those depending on the child and what's needed at the moment.
Not every school benefits from a team of signing TAs and a teacher for the deaf, but many of the strategies used at Willington can be employed at mainstream schools without additional facilities to enable hearing impaired children to access the curriculum fully. This programme focuses on those strategies.
Rosie is severely deaf in the right ear and she's got a severe to profound loss in the left ear, which means that with the good use of hearing aids and a radio aid in the school, she can access speech in good condition.
I was a bit nervous when I came to Wilton Primary School because I'd never been in a mainstream school before. But then I thought it was really good fun because I got friends now. And this is my best friend Ben.
I'm not deaf, but I like signing. It's good fun.
Rosie spends about 10% of her time in the facility. For other children, that could be maybe as much as 50, 60, 70%. But Rosie accesses the mainstream curriculum quite well with differentiation, so we just reinforce it.
Every morning, Rosie and the other hearing impaired children have their hearing aids checked in the facilities.
If they only use their hearing aids, the teacher would have to be very close to Rosie and there'd have to be no background noise. Clearly that's not possible in a primary school. So we use a radio aid. The teacher wears a transmitter and Rosie wears the receiver, which is attached to her hearing aid. That means that the teacher's talking into a microphone positioned about here, and then on a radio wavelength, the sound is transmitted to Rosie's receiver. So she can then be several feet away and she's hearing the teacher's voice as if she were only a metre away.
I'm Miss Binks. I'm Mrs. Taylor. I'm Miss Green. We're teaching assistants in a mainstream school.
Okay, we just have a look at next week.
Every Friday, Jan and her team of TAs look over the teachers' plans for the following week to see what work needs differentiation.
One of the biggest things we do on a Friday is actually making sure that we're consistent with the signs. There's lots of signs in the national, lots of words in the national curriculum which don't have a sign language equivalent, and we would have to decide amongst ourselves what we're going to use for that.
Start off just describing the four categories, and it's got four labels that it's going to then hold up. So that's carbohydrates, proteins, fats, minerals, and vitamins. So we need to be sure about the signs for that. The carbohydrates, I don't know, there is a sign for carbohydrates. So, yeah, because you can point to the word.
We won't have to finger spell it, that's a big word.
And then just after that, just carbohydrates.
My name is Mr. Science. Carbohydrates, well done.
Wayne Sykens is Rosie's class teacher. An NQT, Wayne is still learning how to accommodate a deaf child in his classroom.
Rosie, let's come and get one. I've had a lot of support from the school for supporting Rosie here. I was offered the opportunity to go on a deaf awareness course when I started, and it was very good. It really did help me understand how young impaired children learn. Can we see that? Yes. Well done, Rosie. Good girl.
For mainstream class teachers, it does involve more work having a hearing impaired child in the class. They do need to be very meticulous in their planning and the timetable. And it's quite hard for them when they want to be flexible if a lesson is going well, when we need actually for them to stick to quite a tight structure.
All time instructions. I work very closely with the TAs. We're meeting every morning and we discuss the lessons that are going to come up and the key words that may be used. Well, first thing we're going to talk about time connectives. So I've got all these words made up and they're going to ask for different, I'm going to ask them for different time connectives.
Lots of times last week we actually talked about signs because lots are similar, so I've actually printed out signs for the words underneath. And Rosie and Liam are going to have set each in front of them on the table.
And when we plan our lessons, it's really important that we think and try and make everything as visual as we can, so that all of the children understand exactly what's happening the whole time. And all the work ethics that I use, I'm putting a line on the board. Okay, well, today we're doing an instructional text on how to make a healthy snack. So that Liam and Rosie can visualise what we're doing. I'm going to make it first for them using the apricots, banana chips, etc. in front of them so they can see all the steps.
There isn't actually a sign that we can use apart from peach, small peach, so I've actually printed a picture of an apricot, and we can say similar to a peach.
My greatest thing for finding out if Rosie's understood me or not is through the TA who she works with. And during the lesson, once the lesson started, I'll always go over to the TA to make sure that I give them a couple of minutes to make sure Rosie's got in and the other deaf children understand what's been said.
Problems that Rosie encounters on a daily basis involved in the classroom are the teacher often moves around the classroom, which can make lip reading very difficult for her. It's important for us to try and educate the teachers to try and get them to remain in the same place.
The thing I need to consider probably the most with Rosie in the class is where she's sitting and where I am in relation to her. She needs to be able to see me, to be able to read my lips, as well as be able to see the signer. Yeah, there we go. Also, I need to think about when I'm writing on the board not to speak as well, otherwise she wouldn't know what I'm saying. Well, I'm ordering you, aren't I? So it's ordering language, let's say.
Learn them more than language. Sometimes Mr. Sapens gets to turn on transmitter so she can't hear. There's people saying, "Slow on."
I think the pace of the lessons in year 6 is very fast and it takes an enormous amount of concentration for her to follow the teacher. She lip reads very well and most of the time she's following the teacher, but she will swap over to look at the signer if she's got any doubts at all about what was said. But, and I think the hardest thing for Rosie is if she wants to ask questions back, there's often not time because by the time we've processed that information, she can access it. The teacher's often moved on.
All children in class have moments when they are not focusing on what the teacher says and they might be looking out the window, but they still might be half paying attention because they're half listening to what the teacher's saying. But for Rosie, when she needs those moments, respite, she's actually completely cut off from what's going on. And that can mean that she misses important parts of the lesson. And so it's up to the TA really, who's supporting her at various points in the lesson to ensure that she's on task. The skill we want Rosie to develop is to listen and watch the person talking. So she's using her listening skills and her lip reading skills, but also to use the signer to confirm what she's heard or to reinforce the clarification really. So the skill we want is for her to be able to switch from the person talking to the person signing in order to gain all the information.
Yeah, the other pupils act brilliantly towards Rosie. She's very much part of the class. They help her and support her brilliantly.
I think it's something that she quite likes having the TAs around in the classroom because he very much wants to take an active part in communicating, obviously, Rosie directly. And many times he's asked us what the specific sign is, so he can have a conversation quite fluidly with Rosie.
My relationship with Rosie is I speak to her on a one-to-one, and the signers are there if I can't communicate with them, but I'll always try and speak to her on a one-to-one first of all.
Really important for Rosie to take part in all aspects of school life, not just the mainstream curriculum, but the extracurricular activities. She's just taking part in some football trials, and we will decide whether she needs support for that or not. For something like football, we would support at the beginning, and then she's able to join in with the others without support. Signing is encouraged throughout the school. All assemblies, concerts, Christmas productions are completely signed.
Within the mainstream schools, obviously many teachers are not going to sign, and that's really why we're there to provide that sign support. So it's not essential that they sign. What we would expect from teachers is to learn the basics of good morning, hello, and greetings, so they can have simple conversations with the student, because it just makes such a difference to their life.
So how does Rosie cope in group discussions?
Rosie? Class discussions are difficult for Rosie. I try as hard as I can to, when someone else says something, it's important that I repeat the question, repeat the answer that the child is given, so that Rosie doesn't understand what other people are saying. We do use a transmitter, which helps Rosie to hear. And if another child is speaking up, then we come up to the front and they're used to put the transmitter on themselves, and everyone's very good at doing that, so that allows her to hear.
When the children are working in groups, we do have a conference mic that we can put in the middle of the table and attach a transmitter to it, so that all the children can be heard equally.
So does sharing a classroom work for Rosie and her hearing peers?
Benefits for other children are often visual resources that we provide and differentiated work that we're providing for Rosie and the other deaf children are actually very beneficial for several other students who are in the class. And sometimes our signs can clarify points that perhaps they would have missed.
Rosie is very much accepted within her hearing peer group, and this will have benefits initially at school. Within society, she'll obviously, hopefully move seamlessly into the hearing world outside and into employment.
What advice would the team at Willingdon give to other mainstream teachers?
Make sure that they never start a lesson on a totally new topic without some sort of visual indication of what that lesson is all about.
Yes, and I would say go on a deaf awareness course before you actually start teaching, then you have a wider knowledge of what is needed.
One of the more important aspects is actually having the confidence to communicate with a hearing impaired child. And it's being aware of how much a child can gain just through body language and tone of voice and your posture. They can certainly know if they've done something well, or conversely, if they're doing something they shouldn't do, they can fully understand that without the adult necessarily being able to sign.
My advice to any other teachers that are about to have hearing impaired children in their class is not to be afraid of communicating with them, because even if you don't know sign language, there are many other ways that you can communicate.
Fantastic, because you can say things about other people without them knowing. And it's kind of like a secret language you do, and nobody else really understands. So it's exciting.
I work with it because she helped me at the time when I did that work. Everybody helped me and showed me how to work.
It's fantastic at being a bit like Britain.
So, what did you guys get from that video?
Start a new topic, make sure you have a visual aid, so they don't just hear it, they have to see it.
Very important. And also, don't face the board when you start talking. You know? However, I have this theory. You know, we are all wearing these lovely face coverings these days. I think we all have used visual cues when we've talked to people. Do you find it quite difficult to understand people now? Because we did use a lot of visual cues of the kind of lip reading stuff. So now then, that's going to be hard. And I think one of the other professors is a student with an auditory impairment, and she has to use a face shield rather than these, so you can take the mask off of that. But you know, you gotta do what's right for the kids, and so it's kind of interesting. What else did you find interesting in that video? That FM system that would go right to the hearing aids. That's a real powerful thing, but you got to remember to turn it off. That happens. Works good for kids with attention issues too, but it's very expensive, and so you want to use it when it's appropriate in the IEP. Anything else with Rosie? Her friend is a little precocious, don't you think? Sweets can be precocious. You can talk about other people without them knowing. Okay, anything else about auditory impairments that, remember, you need to have their attention when you're starting a new topic, know the signs. Again, you're going to have a lot of equipment and a lot of additional support people in the classroom. So that's important things to remember. All right. So on Tuesday, what we'll do is I'll talk about some evidence-based instruction on Tuesday. Also finish up with lower incidence disabilities categories. I'll also talk about the final. It's already posted. You can download the final case studies now and start working on them. And I'll send an email when the final is due, the week of finals. Any other questions? Okay, it's a shorter class today. This is usually a lot more conversation going on than what we have. I'll see you guys virtually next week, okay? All right, you have a great day.